So let's dive in a little bit. Can you just give us a quick background, maybe of how you ended up in Montlouis, kind of your
Ah,
adventure to get to Montlouis?
yeah. It's a long story now. I have buy my estate there is 15 years ago. I'm not. I'm. I don't come from a family. It's not a family estate. Uh, I have studied in Burgundy, in Beaune, the wine, and after that, I've worked in Château de Saint-Côme in Gigondas during three years. And after that, I want to buy an estate, and I have uh, with the Safer du Centre. I have visited different property in Montlouis, and I have buy 6.8 hectares in 2005 in Montlouis.
So what made you think of Montlouis? How did it come to? What was the reason that was the spot?
I'm sorry, it's not romantic, but the first reason it's the price of the soil. I, when I have finished my study, I want to buy some land in Burgundy, but it's just a dream, and quickly,
You're not alone in wanting to buy land in Burgundy, I don't think.
maybe in 100 years, but not now. Um,
Well, in
uh,
some ways, it's yeah. Go ahead. No, I was going to
uh,
say in some ways, it's interesting because we've been talking. Last week I was talking to Thibaut Boudignon, who's somewhat the same path that you took to the Loire Valley. He was in Burgundy too for a bit, and I think his mind was there. Jackie and Jean Philippe, Jackie back in the day, I think Burgundy was a model in his mind. And in some ways, all three of you may be in a better spot. We've talked about this today than people in Burgundy because, Chenin Blanc in the Loire Valley in a cooler climate, a grape with great acidity, in some ways you have advantages today that the folks in Burgundy with Chardonnay, it's a little more complicated with the warmer temperatures today. And so it may have been a practical reason that you went to the Loire Valley, but in many ways it's a good place to be for many reasons today. Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt, but I just think it's very interesting that
yeah, it's true. When you taste very old Chenin, uh, you see the global warming. It's good for the Chenin Blanc. Why? It's the Chenin Blanc have need uh, a nice weather and a good vintage to be very, very interesting. And when you test the Chenin Blanc 15 years ago, some vintage is very, very interesting, like 69, 71, but uh, but when you test 64 or vintage like that, it's very hard to test actually too. And the global warming since 25 years be very good for the Chenin Blanc. Very interesting.
same for the red for Co and Cabernet Franc also in Loire Valley. Again, grapes that have great acidity and didn't get ripe every year. Maybe 20 years ago, it was as you said, it was a couple vintages out of 10, or that you really had great vintages. Today, we seem to have very, you know, more consistent. Let's say it's not always perfect, but more consistent vintages year in and year out. Um, so it's I think it's interesting when you think about Burgundy and the fact that a lot of people wanted to be there, and there's still great wines obviously being made. There's nothing to apologize for, but I think that it's no question that Chenin Blanc and the Loire Valley and Cabernet Franc too, in the Loire Valley are kind of the really well situated climatically, and the grapes themselves, because you've got good natural acidity, and now with a little more consistent ripeness each year, I think it's an advantage today. And so, so you came in 2005, and you've kind of tell us about where exactly you're situated in Montlouis, in the appellation, your winery and a lot of your vineyards.
When you look the map of Montlouis, it's a small appellation close to Tours, on the middle of the France. And Montlouis, it's between two rivers, the Loire River on the north, and on the south, the Cher River. And my estate, it's close to the south, close to the Cher River on the south. And my cellar, it's in Dier, just close to my estate, close to my vine. Historically, when we have buy the estates, we have buy a cellar in Amboise, in downtown in Amboise, and the name of this cellar is Le Rocher des Violettes. And when I have decided to take this name for my estate. As for that, actually, it's Le Rocher des Violettes. It's my trademark.
It's a pretty name. So you've got most of your vineyards in that sector, which is kind of the southwest towards the Cher River of Montlouis. A lot of your best sites are in that area. Is that correct?
Yeah. Can you repeat? I'm sorry.
No, I was saying a lot of your vineyards are in that same sector, Saint Martin, that sector of Montlouis near your winery. And tell me what's unique about that spot, and kind of when you came there at the beginning, what the farming was like at the time, and kind of the transition, because you didn't arrive with organically farmed vineyards. You're certified and started converting in 2009. What were the vineyards like when you arrived in 2004, 2005?
When I arrived in 2004, I have visited two vineyards. One very conform, very chemical, and one other one no pruning since 2 years, without string, with a lot of oak everywhere into the vineyard. And I have choice these estates. It's maybe crazy, but there is a lot of work. But I think it's these estates be more preserved, and with a lot of biodiversity. Where when we have visit, there is some deer everywhere, a pheasant, a lot of different. Yeah, exactly. Alive, but a little bit too much.
Too much.
Yeah, and sometimes the life it's hard to. When you have too much deer, you have a big problem during the spring, and when you have les chenilles, how do you say chenilles?
I'm blanking on that. C'est quoi exactement?
C'est le bébé du papillon.
A caterpillar.
Yeah, and it's the same thing during the spring when you have a lot of insect. You can have a big problem for the bunch, and that's happened in 2005 for my first spring, for my first vintage. We have a lot of bunch destroyed with animals, And well,
So tell us, you started conversion in 2009, and you've slowly built up. What's the total amount of hectare at this point today of the domain?
actually, we grow 18 hectares, mostly in Chenin Blanc, and we have some Co. This is a local name for the Malbec, and a little bit Cabernet Franc, little bit Chardonnay, Gros Lot, Gamay, and it's very common for Montlouis to have a lot of different grape variety. Why there is 80 years ago, Montlouis and Vouvray, it's the same appellation. And in 1937, there is a scission between those two appellations, and Montlouis stay, Vouvray stay Vouvray, but Montlouis stopped to produce Vouvray in Montlouis, and the winemaker have need to sell Montlouis, but this appellation it's not famous, and the people have need to survive to plant other grape variety, little bit more, not more famous, but more easy to sell, like a Chardonnay to do sparkling wine, or a Gamay to do easy to drink red wine. That for that in Saint-Martin-le-Beau or Montlouis, there is a lot of different grape varieties.
And you've got
Actually,
some old vines too, some very old vines of Co and
yeah,
Cabernet Franc, which
and
makes them beautiful.
historically in Montlouis, historically, before the scission between Vouvray and Montlouis, the people grow Chenin to sell, and Malbec, the Co, and Gros Lot. Co and Gros Lot, it's for family consume, home consumption. And that for that the plot it's small. A lot of plot of Malbec it's less 10 R, and it's very small. And the plot of Chenin it's more bigger, of course. And that for that we have a very very old plot of Co and Gros Lot. It's a story of the appellation.
So let's dive in. We'll talk about a lot of things during this, but the focus here is Chenin Blanc, obviously, and I want to talk about your Pétillant Originel, which is kind of a unique wine, the 2015. At this point, I think we're looking at what, some 40 months, 42 months on the lees at this point. The 15.
Yeah, usually we start to disgorge after 36 months on yeast. We practice disgorgement each 2 months, and for the vintage 2015, we have some disgorgement after 42 months on yeast.
Can you talk about the vineyard and the site of this, and kind of the history of this wine, and this I mean very natural sparkling wine that you do?
Yeah, we do natural sparkling wine since 2005. The philosophy of this wine, we bottled in fermentation the wine when it's between 12 to 14 grams of natural sugar, and after that the wine stay on yeast, like I said before. Between 36 up to 42 months on yeast, and the philosophy I like when the sparkling it's straight, and with a very nice minerality. and like a very nice champagne, like Celos or Jackson.
So a
I
lot of
like exactly.
purity and kind of precision. So what's the terroir like for where the grapes for this grow? Could you talk about the vineyard?
Alors, the name of this plot for this cuvée, it's Le Moulin. We have a little bit more 1.7 hectares on this plot. For me, it's my favorite plot. Why? It's very easy to work. When it rains a lot, you can go work the soil one day after. It's there is a lot of stone, lot of silex on the top. It's a very nice soil, full south, and the limestone it's just 1 meter under the top of the soil.
And what type of silex do you have in this? Is this the Pérouche that you have
exactly.
here?
On this side, it's a Pérouche. It's a white silex outside, and when you break this silex, it's a little bit brown under the silex. And the form of this silex, it's a little bit like a bird, and for that they use a Pérouche for the name of this.
Great. And the exposition of the site, what's is it
south.
is it south
It's a
facing?
south. And I have planted this plot in 2011. We have buy this plot in 2010. And before, it's during a long time, it's the Lorge. How do you say Orge for the?
Was fallow? There was nothing there?
It's a cereal for during a long time. And the wine be planted there is 30 years ago before. And after
so it's an organic site in many ways that it hadn't had pesticide or
it's not organic. Why the guy it's
okay.
It's normal.
But it had it had been conventionally worked before while it was for the cereal. Okay. The bottom line is it seems like it's a site that you get very good acidity. Even in a vintage like 15, this wine is lifted and has great kind of balance to it. It doesn't feel at all heavy. In a vintage, obviously there was a warm vintage. It feels like the vineyard. I mean, is that because of the limestone bedrock, the silex on the top? Do you have an idea of why the wine is so well balanced for the vintage?
It like I said before, it's very nice soil. While it's each year, it's very not neutral, but very
Consistent?
similar.
Consistent?
That's exactly. It's all the time good. Right?
So
it's a good.
This wine it's only done before it goes into bottle to go through the fermentation. It's basically this wine doesn't see anything. There's no the 12 to 14 grams sugar, natural sugar that create the secondary fermentation. There's no liquor to tirage added of any kind, and then it's topped up with the same wine before bottling. It's topped up with the same wine. You fill it when you disgorge. You fill it back up with the same wine. There's nothing added at any point, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly. When we disgorge, we complete with one of the bottles. Usually, we lost for 500 bottles. We lost 12 bottles to complete the level.
And no indigenous yeast. It's basically from start to finish. It's fairly. There's no intervention, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, it's the same natural yeast. start the fermentation and finish the fermentation into the bottles. It's a natural sparkling wine.
Yeah, superb.
For that we bottled this wine in November usually, during the harvest, to the end of the harvest.
So I want to talk. I want to jump towards one of my favorite wines from you, and I know it's one of your most important wines, the Touche Mitaine. And we've got the 18, which is a warm but superb vintage. Can you talk about this plot and a little bit about? I mean, this is I know a vineyard that is it's a cool site. Can you talk a little bit about Touche Mitaine and the vineyard and the style of the soil there?
The Touche Mitaine, it's one big plot where we have little bit less 5 hectares on this plot. It's not the same exposition. It's a west exposition for this soil, and it's clay on the top, a little bit peruche, and more sandy than Le Moulin. And the age of the vine, it's between 15 up to 60 years old. Like I say often, the young vine give the acidity, and the old vine gives the complexity. And it's a blend between those vines. And the wine be aged on a neutral barrel mostly, and some vintage we use a stainless steel tank for one part to keep a freshness. And for the vintage 18, it's 100% on the oak barrel, while we have a big problem with mildew.
So you had you had a very low quantity and less quantity.
22 hectoliters by hectares in 2000.
Wow. So it's neutral wood in general, correct? It's not. It's a little bit. What's the size of the barrels? It's a mix.
For Touche Mitaine, it's 228 liters. It's yes, it's not a choice. It's when I have built my estates, I have buy a lot of old barrel. Not old, but now she's old. But I have buy a lot of barrel in 2005, and this barrel it's 2028 liters. But traditionally in the Loire Valley, the people use 500 or 600 liters barrels. It's a demi-muit.
Mm-hmm. And but I mean, I want to say across the board with your wines, even when they're done in barrel, and this one here, again, 18 was a warm vintage, but this wine has really good freshness. There's great acidity, which obviously Chenin brings. Can you talk a little bit about the terroir in this site?
Alors, it's funny why my part of my estates, it's a very acid soil. If you take the soil of Montlouis, it's a basic soil, usually 7.2 pH. And of Saint-Martin-le-Beau, close to my estates, the pH of the soil, it's a 5 or 5.5 sometimes, but it's very acid. It's unusual why under the soil you have the limestone. The limestone, it's basic, but on the top you have a soil acid. And I think that give the acidity, one part of the acidity of the wine. And the other part, we try to harvest not too overripe. We try to harvest the Chenin ripe, but usually we try to harvest when the Chenin have 13.5, maximum for the dry wine alcohol potential.
So this is this vineyard here, the exposition. C'est quelle face?
West. Touche Mitaine West.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a cooler site.
Yeah.
Superb. Really, really outstanding. I feel like there's some vintages, 18, you've got to me, the wine has a little bit more amplitude. It's a little bit rounder than some of the previous vintages of this site. But you still have this really good, saline core to it. And particularly in the finish, you get the saltiness in the back of the mouth. A great food wine. Beautiful balance. Can you talk a little bit about we mentioned a little bit about global warming. How have you adapted in the vineyards at all, kind of the work that you're doing with the farming to the vineyards the last 3 or 4 years? Is there anything that you're doing differently as far as the farming with the climate change?
Yeah. In 15 years now, we have seen a big difference. Now we harvest 1 month before 2006 or 2007. It's just amazing.
A month earlier.
Yes, just in 15 years. And since 3 years, we try to avoid to enlever des feuilles.
To take off too many leaves.
Yeah, too many leaves.
You want to leave some type of cover.
Yeah, and to avoid to burn off the sun, and we try to work the soil a little bit more to avoid too much competition with different grass, with the water. And now we work with to change the rootstock, to use some rootstock more adapted with the dry weather and without and very warm weather.
So at the same time that this is happening, in talking to growers in some other regions, you are lucky where you are that you do have that limestone that's a really beneficial as a whole, and you have some clay in some of your sites too that hold some water at least to help to offset a little bit of these very dry vintages. What was it?
Yeah.
Last summer you had what, 3 months with 0 rain, if I remember correctly, in the summer?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's and still your vines, I think, held up better than many, and obviously the canopy management, the leaf management had to be that from what everybody said was that's a big change that people are doing the last few years to give the grapes some protection from the sun. I know some of your colleagues who have some vines in Vouvray, they had some very there was some sectors that were really, the grapes were just fried, grilled. A lot of grapes were grilled and burned as you described.
Yeah. And obviously we have a very nice variety for the very adapted for the global warming. Chenin, it's I think we have I hope we have 15 years again behind me.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because Chenin Blanc, we were talking with Andrea Molyneux about that last night. It is this amazing varietal that is very adaptable. It's very versatile in many ways, and she's in South Africa,
Yeah.
And, you know, even in California, it's always been a very important grape, particularly in the past. It's coming back a little bit. And yeah, you're in an amazing place right now with this, I think, with this grape at this moment in Loire Valley, because, you know, as you mentioned, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it wasn't every year that it was perfect or it was easy. And now with the ripeness, you've got that great acidity, and yeah, it's a grape that's adapting. I have a question that's a little bit, you know, I've talked to some people in Burgundy, and we were talking with Thibaut Bougnon about Chenin and the adaptability of it to the climate. And I have growers in Burgundy who've talked about Chardonnay adapting better than Pinot Noir to the climate change, for example. Have you noticed that Chenin versus maybe some of your red varietals has been more able to deal with these warm vintages than some of your red grapes or other varietals, or is it similar?
It's similar. It's
Similar.
yeah. For example, the Malbec in the Loire Valley, it's benefic the global warming for the Malbec in Loire Valley. Why it's more easy to do more consensual wine with Malbec actually than 10 years ago. It's a tannin, it's more soft, it's ripe, and the fruit it's so pretty. It's nice, and I'm not sure if we produce a Chenin Blanc like 30 or 40 years ago, the people, it's too elitist wine, I think. When you have too much acidity and you have need 20 years before to taste the wine, it's not possible now. And it's global warming.
So,
I'm sorry.
no, I was just thinking, I think that's a great statement, is that the Chenin Blanc made 30 years ago, maybe with a lot more sugar, even capitalized frequently
Yes,
to round out that high acidity that
the yield
was
it's not the same. It's there is a lot of different parameters, and the
very good
people
point.
use more copper, and the copper stops the maturity of the grapes, and no, this technique change, all the technique change, the yield change now in the Loire Valley. The people produce not more. How would you say?
Reasonable yields.
Exactly, exactly.
So can you talk, because Montlouis is what, about a fifth the size of Vouvray? It's much smaller than your neighbor across the river. Correct? It's about 1/5.
I'm sorry.
C'est un cinquième de Vouvray
Exactly.
en taille.
Yes.
So talk about, I mean, I think Montlouis is kind of amazing because you have a very high percentage of growers who think and farm organically. Percentage wise, it's a very high percentage compared to a lot of places in France, even in the Loire Valley. You've got a very good, even during these frost dangers the last 3, 4, 5 years, you've got a really good spirit in the village. You work together to try to combat the danger in the spring. And what do you how do you explain that? Because I just think there's this amazing spirit in the village that is, I mean, it's growing throughout France. There's much more, you know, concern about farming and nature and doing things in an organic fashion. But Montlouis is a step above in some way, I would say. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Actually, Montlouis, it's 60% of the surface in organic. There is 10 different grower in organic, and that give emulsion. It's correct, emulsion, and emulation.
Oh yeah, there are people who want to emulate.
Yeah, and exactly, and you, when you are alone, when you are on the middle of nowhere, organic, and around you you have a chemical grower, and when other people start to grow organically, you see a lot of this is a synergy. You understand synergy?
Yep, same word.
And it's more easy to not combattre, mais how do you say combattre? To fight, not to fight. It's
you work together. You all are working towards the same goal to a certain degree.
Yeah, yes, we work together.
Yeah. No, I think I think it's a really special spirit that you have in Montlouis, and you feel it. I think it's great that there's a spirit of cooperation, a spirit that and it's not across the board that you see that throughout France. Listen, I want to talk a little bit about what I call your premier cru, the Négrette, which I feel is a very special wine that, it's always a wine you release a little bit later. It's got a lot more complexity. Can you talk about, and I think sometimes it's confusing, but Négrette is the name of the site. It's a very small vineyard that's near your winery. Can you talk about it, please?
Yeah, exactly. It's Négrette. It's the plot the more to the east of the appellation, and just behind La Négrette there is La Grande Négrette, the Great Négrette. Négrette. I'm sorry, and on this plot, on the past, the people say they produce the best Vouvray. And in 1921, the better Vouvray in Salon de l'Agriculture à Paris, it's come from La Négrette. And in
so that's an interesting. So before Montlouis was an appellation of its own, and it was all labeled as Vouvray until 1937, right? But
exactly.
1937, and so I think that's just an amazing story, which you just found out about recently. That in 1921, the top Vouvray, which included all the vineyards from Montlouis, as labeled as Vouvray, was Négrette. It's an amazing story.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's a very small lieu-dit, right? C'est pas grand.
Yeah. In total, there is 30 hectares in La Négrette.
Oh, okay, it's bigger than I thought.
But now a lot of wood.
Okay, so it's not all in vineyard. It's in
Yeah.
vineyard. It's so tell us. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And now it's 5 hectares in La Négrette, and I have 1.6 hectares in this plot. And it's a very, very old vine. This vine be planted in 1922. And the soil, it's silex on the top. And on the deep, there is some clay. But the soil, it's very deeper. There is more 4 meters of blue clay.
Mm-hmm.
It's
the kind for pottery almost.
It's oxidative clay. It's blue. and when it's oxidate, it's red.
Okay. So
Uh,
there's some iron in it.
I'm
Fair.
I'm sorry.
Say ferrous.
Fair. It's when it's red. There is some iron in those two formation, but when it's reductive, it's a blue. It's a little blue between blue and green clay. And on this soil, it's very cold soil. Why usually we harvest 2 weeks after Touche Mitaine this soil, and 3 weeks
2 weeks
after.
later.
Yes, 2 weeks after. Yeah, later. And 3 weeks after les Borderies. And when we harvest 3 weeks after, we have 1 degree under les Borderies when we harvest 3 weeks before.
Wow.
It's
So
it's a cold soil, but it's very interesting why that give a nice acidity, nice complexity, and big body. And it's a keeping wine. In 2015, for the 10 year of my essays, we have do a vertical of La Négrette, and the better vintage is more older vintage, while the other one it's too young.
wow. It's a wine that it seems to me almost have a red wine structure to it. There's a tannicity to it.
And little bit tannic. There is
Exactly.
yeah, and
Exactly. There's a I
and it's funny why for the very warm vintage like '09, we have taste '09 together. '09 or 18 or 19. This plot is all the time very fresh, and all the time big acidity and a nice pH. Well, it's
it's very Burgundian. There's almost days to taste it, and this bottle of 17, which is outstanding. I'm look forward to tasting it over a little bit. We're getting towards the end, so I love tasting that wine and could do it, but I want to talk a little bit about Borderies because we've got the 15 here, and this is one of your lieux-dits that I think is very interesting. You talked about the harvest date, and I know you've told me that this is a vineyard that tells you how to make the wine, that it's not a wine that you try to make a demi-sec, it's a wine that wants to be a demi-sec to a certain degree. Can you talk about Borderies?
Borderies is very close to the Forêt d'Amboise, on the north of Saint-Martin-le-Beau. We grow over there 4 hectares. It's silt, clay, and limestone, on limestone. On this soil, usually it's very easy to have a very nice maturity. And we start to harvest when we harvest. Too much alcohol to do dry wine, and that for that since '06 we have taken a decision to do a sweet wine on this plot. All the time we have very nice acidity, and we try to do a sweet wine with not too much sugar. Sometimes between 10 to 15 grams of sugar by liters. This is a good, it's my opinion. This is a good balance for demi-sec. You can dry and you can heat with this demi-sec.
You almost can't, because of the great acidity and the balance, it doesn't taste even like a demi-sec when you taste it. There's definitely the sugar. You know there's some sugar there, but I think for a lot of people, it does not taste like they think about a demi-sec. And it's a very sneaky great food wine. It's been one of the most successful, and even in 15, the wine is very kind of digestible. It doesn't feel heavy. the sugar is not intrusive, and I'm always very impressed when I taste it. I think it's just so versatile. It's a great example of the versatility, and I think it's a brilliant wine. Sorry, I didn't mean. I couldn't resist talking about it.
You have said everything. Now to finish for this wine, it's fermented on small and natural oak barrels, and we bottled when the balance be interesting, and
by taste, you taste.
We taste. This is a little bit technique wine, and to do a nice balance, to have a nice balance, you have need to taste each week during the end of the fermentation. Usually it's during the first week of the spring, and when the balance is nice, we bottled. We do a filtration and we bottled. Like that, we never stop the fermentation with some sulfite, with sulfur. We bottled with filtration, sterile filtration. But like that, you avoid to put too much sulfite.
Yeah, no, you've told me in the past that you'd rather do the filtration to avoid any issues with the wine long term, and that allows you to use less sulfur and it to be more natural, and you feel that that's the best way to produce this wine in a way that is both stable but also respects the grape and the terroir the best.
It's true.
So talk about where you see, the future of, 19 was a complicated vintage. Tell us a little bit of, just before we have just a few minutes left, talk about how's the harvest going today for the current harvest. What are we looking at? What's the season been like?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
For this harvest, pour maintenant, pour la récolte.
We have never seen that. It's we have 1 month early.
Wow.
It's not a big vintage. We have not big yields. It's between 4 to 6 grapes by vine. And I think the vine be suffer with the last summer, with the dry summer, and some vine be not produce too much. And I'm a little bit inquiet.
Worried.
Worried why with not too much grapes, with early vintage. Yes, I think we go harvest the third week of August.
Wow. Things are going fast. That's amazing.
Yeah.
No, it's funny you talk about the previous vintage, because I think people don't always realize that you have a little bit almost of a hangover from, it's a carryover from last vintage. The lack of water last year affects the vines this year, and you're saying you see that, so it's a cumulative. It affects the vineyards, not just last year, but it also carries over to this year. So it's at least there was no frost this year, which was a good thing.
Yeah, the big difference between the last year. Last year we have no rain, and this year it's warm and we have some rain, and the vine never stops the activity, and the cycle of the vine be short, I think, and that for that we go harvest very, very early this year.
And if I've understood correctly, it's been difficult for you to keep up with all the work in the vineyards. It's been very fast, very.
Yeah,
it's a busy time. So, well, listen, I'm delighted to taste this lineup today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you so much. It's a pleasure to see you. I hope to be able to get back. Usually I'm in France at this time, saying hello at some point in the summer, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll hope that things are improved. Take care, Xavier. Thank you so much.
Take care too. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Have a nice night.